interesting folks from Code for America, Code for Australia, and Code for Canada. There is a lot to share and learn from one another. So let's start.
Yeah.
So I would like to share a bit of a background. The KP Fellowship Program is a 6-month program, which is supported by Code for Pakistan, the KPIT Board, and the World Bank. The program brings together technologists, government agencies, and the public to adopt user-centric, lean, and agile development methodologies to solve problems and increase civic engagement by creating innovative solutions in public services. The key goals of the program are to increase citizen reach, creating efficiency in government processes, empowering government, and increasing government transparency. So next, please. So we have been running the program for almost 5 years now. So since 2014, when the program initially started, we have created a lot of impact. In these past 5 years, we have created 28 digital solutions for over 21 government departments, while 87 fellows have graduated from the program. The fellows who graduate from the program become part of our alumni network and continue to mentor new fellows and also volunteer on some projects with the government. Next, please. So we have prepared this showcase video, which we share some of the impact that we have created, and also the fact that we were able to launch the Government Innovation Lab with our program partners KPIT Board. So if you can kindly play the video. So Pakistan ranks as 148th in e-governance. There is a trend in the government nowadays that we are moving towards more digitization and online initiatives. And we are very thankful to our program partners, the KPIT Board and the World Bank, for assisting us implement these digital solutions. And with the new government, I think there's resolve from the government as well that they want to move towards online tools and online e-governance initiatives. So there are different initiatives like e-health and e-libraries, and there are a lot of initiatives. And we were able to, since I mentioned that we were able to launch almost 28 digital solutions in these past 5 years. And this used to be the place we used to work from, the Dushal Hub. It's a co-working space which is home to the Government Innovation Lab, where our fellows used to work before the COVID pandemic. And we were able to work very closely with government departments, and we were able to create some of amazing solutions which have a lot of user adoption from the citizens of KP. And we continue to do this, and I'll be sharing what we were able to do, shift the program remotely. As this slide say that we were able to save almost 30,000 plus hours in government processing time. So we are very proud to partner with the KPIT board and launch this, to be running this program for these past 5 years. So yeah, so I would like to share what the timeline of the fellowship looks like. So the fellowship program, initially we have the pre-fellowship phase. In the pre-fellowship phase, we work on the problem discovery. We collect problem statements from different government departments. We have a selection criteria. We assess the impact. We assess the government department's capability of adopting a particular solution. And once we finalize these problem statements, we focus on team recruitment and team formation. We match the fellow skill set to a particular problem statement, and we create teams. So in the fellowship phase, when the fellowship starts, our focus is on user research and training. Since these solutions are developed with the citizens in mind, a core focus from our team is on user research. And also product development takes place. There are a lot of reviews and demo days since we work closely with the government partners. And also service deployment takes place after the initial 3 or 4 months when the MVPs are ready and the solutions are starting to take a professional and developed look. And also there is a focus on documentation because we want to enable the government departments to continue building upon these solutions, and they can hire more technical teams so that they can take these solutions forward. Post fellowship, the focus is on sustainability. We have a very strong M&E process, and we do impact assessment. And there are also retrospective. We want to figure out what went wrong or what went right during a typical cycle, and we conduct these retrospective calls after the conclusion of a fellowship cycle. And we have a very vibrant alumni network. Since I mentioned that there are over 87 fellows who have graduated, and all of these fellows are part of the alumni network, and they continue to mentor new fellows, and they work on open source projects with the government. So we have a vibrant community there as well. So next, please. So these photos show how we used to run the fellowship before the COVID pandemic. So as you can see, there were lots of hands-on trainings. There's a lot of collaboration, mentorship. These photos are from the Durshal Hub, which I mentioned in the video. We used to have hands-on demo days. We used to invite our government partners, and it used to be very interactive. So this was one of the challenges, that how are we going to transition from a very hands-on and collaborative fellowship to one which is virtual and which is conducted remotely. Next, please. So we wanted to redesign the fellowship program to run remotely, and I believe you all guys will agree that these past 4 months have been really uncertain. Just before the launch of the sixth cycle, Pakistan had its first outbreak, and the country went into lockdown, and our launch timeline was pushed. So we went back to the drawing board, and we thought, how are we going to launch this year's cycle? So our team decided to run the program remotely. We prepared a concept note and we submitted to our government partners. And after evaluation, the concept note was accepted, and we had a go ahead to launch the program remotely. So in the redesigned program, we are focusing on incorporating virtual team building, training, mentoring, and product development. The remote cycle also uses a lot of online collaborative tools to deliver sessions, organize team huddles, and facilitate user research. We are also making a concerted effort to support frontline government departments on COVID relief activities, because some of the departments, like the Department of Health, have been really, they have finding it very difficult to cope with the situation because of the increased workload created due to the pandemic. Next, please. So these are some of the how we are modifying the activities. We are conducting online meetings with our government partners. We conducted some in-person meetings initially for requirements gathering, but these meetings were conducted following SOPs with the fellows and government partners, wearing face masks and keeping a safe distance from each other. We also have a very strong focus on online trainings. We are working on online collaborative tools like Figma. We are using Slack. We are using GitHub for online team collaboration. We are also having mentors from different areas, since the remote fellowship allows us to have mentors from across Pakistan and also internationally to mentor our fellows. So we are conducting mentorship online. And since we follow agile methodology, we are conducting daily sprint meetings online as well. So this is a snapshot. So when we were planning to start the remote fellowship cycle, as I mentioned that before starting each cycle, we collect problem statements from the government partners as well. So we had collected over 40 problem statements from different government departments, but we had to pivot our selection criteria with the COVID-19 pandemic in mind. So we wanted to support frontline government departments, and we wanted to support departments so that we can help them transition to online mode of service delivery. As you know, that it's very difficult for in-person visits to the department. And in Pakistan, people struggle already. Like even before the pandemic, people had to change buses to reach to the government department. There are a lot of people who are belonging to remote areas, and accessibility has remained a problem. And it has been one of the main mandates of the fellowship program to utilize online tools so that we can facilitate the end user, which are the citizens in Pakistan. So after the pandemic, our focus was that how can we facilitate key government departments so that they can transition towards online mode of service delivery, and also support our frontline government departments like the Department of Health on the COVID-19 pandemic relief activities. So next, please. So this year, our recruitment was also a little different. We hired a team of fellows with data science background almost a month in advance before launching the fellowship cycle in June. So this team was hired in May. The primary purpose of hiring this team was to support the Department of Health on the IPMS platform, which is the Integrated Patient Management System. And these data science fellows are working on data collection and reporting of COVID-19 cases across the KP province and are helping the government in decision making on either relaxing the SOPs or increasing or figuring out zones where there is a high outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. Please, next, please. Uh, Apart from the IPMS support team, we are also working with the health department on the digitization of pharmaceutical licenses. There are a lot of pharmacies in the KP province, but they used to visit the department to get a license to open up a pharmacy or to get some regulatory approval of selling particular drugs. We're also working with the Department of Planning and Development Department, which collects concept notes from all adjacent departments on development initiatives. We're also working on a very interesting project on the lab information management system for livestock and dairy research department, where citizens can, submit blood samples or other samples of their cattle and other animals, and it can help them at the department to detect early pandemics within the dairy farms, and it can also improve the quality of milk these dairy farms produce. So it's very impactful project. And also we are working on the digitization of fund disbursement for the benevolent fund cell. So this department works for the benefits of government employees. It helps them distribute grants and pension funds if the demise of a government department employee, their families are benefited. So we are working on the digitization of this department. And we are also working to support some of our partners and projects developed in the previous cycle. So we have also focused on sustainability within our fellowship, and we do support our partners. And this during this fellowship cycle, we are supporting 3 government partners from previous cycles. Next, please. So I believe behind the success of every project, a strong team is needed. I'm very grateful to be part of a very amazing team. I'm grateful to the head of fellowship program, Ms. Anam Zakaria, and also to Ibtihaj, who is the government innovation lead, and also to my superstar team of Suhail and Nazim, who have been working, assisting the program and managing everything so well, even in the remote cycle. Nazim has been going and conducting in-person meetings, following strict SOPs. So I think I'm really grateful to be a part of this team. And this, the fact that we were able to design the program in such a short notice and launch the program remotely, the credit goes to the team, and I'm really grateful to my team. Next, please. So with this, I would conclude my presentation. I would like to say that we are constantly learning with our experiences in running the program remotely. We are taking note of the advantages and flexibility remote work provides. And we are, it's still uncertain as to how we will go forward, but I believe that the fact that we are running the program remotely is giving us a lot of knowledge, and we'll incorporate the best parts of running the program remotely. And as we go forward to next cycles, and we will have the best parts of the remote fellowship, and also create some sort of a hybrid model, or have some in-person meetings and also remote, so that we can have the best of both worlds. So I'm happy to answer your questions after everything concludes. So thank you so much for all partners for conducting this session, and giving us a platform to share our learnings. So it's great feeling to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. I'll give it over here then to Cassitie. So we did have a bit of an issue here with the remote control feature in Zoom, as you guys did see. So Cassitie, if you need to have it just like manually done, then I'm happy to control your slides here for you as well. If it doesn't actually work here for you, let me know.
Let's see how it goes.
Let me know.
Yeah, it's looking like you'll have to.
Okay, fair enough. Always have technical difficulties the day of. No worries.
No worries.
You got nervous.
So yeah, next slide, please. So yeah, my name's Cass. For those who don't know me, I'm the head of delivery for Code for Australia and part of our 3-person base team. So I'm the person who looks after the day-to-day operations in terms of our programs, of which the fellowship is one of our key programs that we run. Next slide. So this is just a little image to kind of give an idea of our fellowship delivery and what it looks like. So this is our tried and tested model that we've had for a long time and has been working pretty well for us over the past few years. So basically, most of our fellowships have been running for 6 months at a time, and we have 3 fellows, and normally that's a mix of roles. So generally we have a mix of designers and developers, or occasionally the odd data scientist thrown in. And we partner pretty much with government partners. And as you can see, there's kind of 2 directories. So we're quite flexible and responsive to how far along they are with their idea. So maybe they already have a product or a project that's in the works, or maybe they're more exploratory, and that will kind of affect how much the discovery and the development phases will take throughout that 6 months. And another key tenet of it, I guess, is that normally we would work physically in those government departments. And part of the reason for that is that capability journey along the way, and learning from each other is just as important to us as the product that we make at the end, or the solution we deliver. So next slide. So COVID came, and obviously things changed. I kind of wanted to show that this had upsides and downsides in terms of this work, specifically for the fellowship. So how it's changed for the better. So for one thing, online tools can and do work, much to the shock of many people that we work with, who I think were a bit hesitant at first. So for example, we've done user testing, we use a lot of online whiteboarding tools, obviously having online meetings on different platforms. 2 of the ones that became new to us because of COVID and having to try and find the best solution, especially working with some of our partners who maybe weren't used to using things like Miro, which can seem quite complex. We ended up using Google's Jamboard quite frequently for a whole lot of different sessions. And also IdeaFlip we've used a bit, which is a much more simplified version, I guess, if you're just doing whiteboarding or using Post-it notes. We found that the simpler solutions were often the best ones, especially when we're trying to get people on board with trying these new tools. And I'm happy to say that actually a lot of our government partners have actually started using these tools for their own meetings outside of their work with us, which has been really nice to see. Another upside is it does open up our recruitment channels. So as you can imagine, in Australia, it's a really big country, and a lot of our population's just in Sydney and Melbourne, which means that when we do have fellowships in other states, it can be a bit challenging to get local staff, and why we would definitely preference and wish to get local staff who have knowledge of the area. Sometimes it limits who we can get. So being able to make new fellowship opportunities remote means that we can hear from, get applicants from more diverse backgrounds and people we may not have connected with or had an opportunity for otherwise. Another good benefit, I think, was the flexibility for our staff. I can definitely say from my own personal perspective, while obviously being in lockdown and not being able to leave your home obviously isn't enjoyable, but for me, there were some upsides in terms of, like, I didn't have a 1-hour commute every morning. I had more time for my life admin. I can have lunch with my partner and watch TV on my lunch break with someone. That's nice. And I go as far to say that I think our base team will definitely be keeping an element of that once we actually are able to go back to our office. So we're looking and discussing at the moment flexible working options, so maybe spending 2 days at home and then 3 days in the office. And I know as well that some of our government partners in other states in Australia have been able to come back to their offices, but are also considering those flexible working conditions themselves, which is really great to see. And one just little practical one, which is it just saves money. And that means we can channel that into more important stuff. Obviously, paying our wonderful fellows is one of our largest costs, but there's like a lot of little things that do add up in terms of running events where you're buying a bunch of sandwiches that go unused, for example, or having to fly to attend different conferences, flights and accommodation. All of that can be put to better use elsewhere. So next slide. Thank you. So we've achieved some stuff. So I might have to flip through again. So one thing we're very excited about that's happened during COVID was we've launched our first live app. So we've launched other live products, but not an app. So for us, this was very exciting. So this was done with a local council in Melbourne. And basically it's an app to let people know about the recycling system. Oh, Doug, look at Doug's face. There we go.
Sorry, guys.
No worries. So yeah, this is an app that one of our teams created to let people know about changes to the recycling system in their area. So this was actually a shorter fellowship. So it was already something new and challenging. It was only 4.5 months instead of 6 months. And COVID happened right at the final stage of their project, which was really hard because they already had existing challenges in terms of making the right contacts and getting into the right flow and rhythm with their government hosts. So to have that happen and then finally feel like things are getting along and getting on track and then having to make those adjustments all over again was really challenging. So the fact that it still came out and launched within that 4.5 months was amazing. So next slide. Another one that was in the middle of happening was our legal aid triage tool. So the point of this project, which is still ongoing, was that legal aid provides free legal assistance to people in Australia, in New South Wales in this case, and their phone line was overwhelmed. So we were brought in to come up with a triage tool that you could use online. So it's currently in the beta testing phase at the moment, but all of the user testing had to be done remotely using different tools. And there was a really interesting combination of having the online clickable prototypes, but also having a meeting in Google Hangouts and recording the meeting as well, so that our team could go back and reflect and get actually see the live reactions as they were happening when people were clicking onto new pages. And yet again, the legal aid team has adopted a lot of the tools that we've been using for their own meetings, which has been great to see. Next slide. So it's not all good, obviously. So how it's changed has been tough for us. So for one thing, government's really busy with COVID-related work. So where we were more in the early relationship phase with some government partners and just discussing potential fellowships, for example, it's been much harder to keep that momentum up, obviously, because their energy needs to be diverted elsewhere, which we totally appreciate. I think the flip side of that, though, was it actually gave us a lot of time to do stuff that was sitting on the back burner that was really important, but we never really made time for. So we've been doing a lot of strategy work at the moment, including one of my colleague Esther, who's doing a big marketing strategy for the whole organization at the moment. And we wouldn't have had space for that work if it wasn't for some of these other things being put on hold. Another one is our partners are spread thin on comms. This is the #1 piece of feedback we keep getting from our government partners, is because now everyone's online, but they have different suppliers and contractors and different people they work with. They're on Teams, they're on Google Hangouts, they're on Zooms. So it's been really challenging for them to keep track of it and kind of tiring them out. I guess in that sense, it gave us a chance to show our adaptability. And just pick one central channel, and we were happy to adapt. And I think that gives us a little bit of a give and take or leeway when, maybe our teams want a change or want to suggest a change from our side. Another big one is forging that team connection remotely, which is something Ibraheem touched on in his presentation. First, we really just thought, because our team is super social and very chatty, so we thought, oh, okay, this wouldn't be too much of a problem. We'll just make a team lunch online and everyone's going to rock up and be just like they are normally. It didn't happen. It was super awkward. And yeah, we needed to acknowledge that we just can't do it the exact same way. So we had to adapt to that. So we've been doing things like having Pictionary sessions on Jamboard or watching videos while we eat, so people don't feel the need to make conversation, and making a conversation starter. And then same with our development sessions as well. So we're having more structured educational sessions, not just social sessions as well. And that's all being done remotely. The final one too is battling burnout. I know it's been a particular challenge for both us and base team, but also a lot of our fellows, which was really, disheartening for us to see at first. It's hard when you're working at home. There is that blur between work and home life. And when you're not able to do any other hobbies or things in your free time, with some of our fellows have fallen victim to the, oh, I might as well work. So I understand that, but I guess the flip side of that one is that it did give us a chance to have a really honest and open dialogue with our teams around mental health. So we've done a few sessions about self-care and making a tailored self-care plan, about taking leave, about what we can do to look after ourselves. And if that wasn't kind of the impetus for that, maybe that wouldn't have happened. So even though that's still something we're battling with, I think it's great that it's brought some of these things to the forefront. Next slide. So those benefits I kind of mentioned before about having flexibility, saving a bit of cash, being able to do things remotely, giving us more opportunities in terms of recruitment, and showing people in government primarily that it can work, has meant that it's kind of fit in with some other things that we've been trying to do, other initiatives that we've been trying to consider lately. And like I said, our tried and tested model has worked well for us, but we're also keen to try new things, especially given that our base team has been new within the last year. So we're keen to test some new ideas out. So for one example, who our partners are, so we're trying to partner with other different levels of government. Normally we just work with state, but for us, we're trying to consider how we can work with smaller local government and also non-for-profits. And they're people who may have smaller budgets or might only be able to hire people part-time, and finding that remote system kind of fits up well with that. Who's on our team? So we're currently looking into different ideas such as we're having data scientists on the team, or just having a team of developers, or just having, rather than having that mix, or also considering junior and senior fellowships. So that'll kind of give us a wider pool of fellows, rather than just capturing people who are mid-career, that we can create more opportunities for people. And also the fellowship length is something that we're definitely playing around with a lot. We're being much more open to accommodating shorter projects, as long as, they meet all our requirements that we're looking for. And also keen to kind of take on a larger plan of work where there might be multiple fellowships with the same government host, or maybe we could even do some of our other programs as well as a fellowship with the same partners. And I feel, given that everyone's being much more flexible and adaptable, this might be a good time for us to consider a lot of these initiatives. And I think that's it. Yes, it is. Look at that.
Remember that if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat and we go through them at the end. So don't hesitate.
Awesome. Thanks, Cassitie. So because we're having some issues with the remote control feature, I'll just click for your slides or fill sign if that's okay.
Thanks, Doug. Should we give it a try, or should we just, I can give you a thumbs up when I'd like you to click through.
All right, let's see here.
Just see.
I just gave it to you here right now. Let me know.
Okay.
Oh, there we go. All right.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone here. I'm really thrilled to be here, and I'm thankful for the opportunity. Thank you so much to panelists. Thank you to everyone at Code for All. I'm excited to be a part of this fellowship panel and share a little bit more about remote working. I think the most important thing to start off here is I actually am a Code for America remote employee. So I work from New York. So this has been something that, sort of shifting is a light word after the pandemic was something that, we had seen and we're kind of used to. It was just getting everyone up to speed. So I guess I'll start right at the top and share the fellowship team. So again, Philston Abakar, I'm the program manager, and the fellowship team is also comprised of the associate director of the network, who is Hashim Tayuzi. We are a pretty distributed team on the network team. Code for America generally is based in San Francisco, the Bay and Oakland area, but both my manager and my associate director and I are remote. So kind of getting folks up to speed here was something we were used to a little bit and took a little bit of time, but let's jump right in. So, I'm 1 day shy of a year of being in this role and working on the fellowship with Code for America. So I think important to start up our conversation with talking about champions within the government, local government space. I want to start off by sharing this quote from the CIO of the city of Miami, who we had worked with earlier on in his tenure as a program manager in a role similar to mine. Speaking of catching champions earlier on in government and hopefully following them in their career. So he says, we in the government innovation space, whether you're somewhere like Code for America or a brigade member or working in an innovation department, have to be conscious that we're not saving the day against the government machine. We need to make everyone in government also a part of the movement. We talk about building with and not for. You have to invest in people, and I think that's critical if you really want to scale and you really want things to last. You have to invest in the people that are already here. And when I joined last year, I hadn't known how many government partners that Code for America had worked with. Impressively, that number is over 100. You know, these folks are people that are dedicated to change, leading the pack in innovation, hopefully folks that are into iterating quickly, which is what we've had to do here, and a lot of the work that we do and what we know. So I want us to kind of keep this quote top of mind as far as how champions approach this work, and how we hope that our government partners see us with or without a pandemic, twin pandemics, unfortunately, in this country right now. So let's move into the challenge, things that we'd seen, you know, how we kind of got derailed at the top of the year. We had a key opportunity and we had this incredible moment where we were gonna, and I'll move into this in just a moment, some program changes that ultimately helped during this pivot before we knew that we were gonna need to do this. The intention was to announce the new program changes at the Code for America Summit, and this was our 10-year anniversary. And this was the perfect moment to bring our a previous cohort of fellows on stage. You know, these folks did incredible work. Example of that was the team from Miami, Mike Strassi being one of those incredible champions of their work. We plan to have my director, Hashim, on stage to introduce them, share a little bit more about the work that the cohort had done. And we had a fellowship keynote to be delivered by another one of our fellows. Our intention here was to have this clear call to action. We had a table planned. This was our opportunity to schmooze and engage with all of the incredible people that would have been in the room at that point. So these are technologists of every background and every kind. We'll talk a little bit more about how we're defining technologists in a moment. And just that one-on-one opportunity to really dig in with these people didn't happen. Let's see if I'm clicking through right here. So Summit is canceled. And, you know, essentially the world is on fire. And so with these incredible new program changes that happened at the top of the year, where we took the feedback of fellows from previous cohorts and figured how to, you know, ways to make the program better, and again, more iterative and exciting for folks that we wanted to bring on board. This was really tough to deal with. And so some questions we needed to ask ourselves here was, you know, are we still able to facilitate the strong government partnership during a global pandemic when there's so much at stake? You know, can we, or how do we ensure that folks who are completely aligned with our program goals can prioritize the funding for the opportunity? And these are folks that their offices are not only facing budget cuts, you know, and like hundreds and occasionally triple digit, like millions, you know, but there are deficits and furloughs. And so we're kind of in this tough position where these people might not be, you know, exactly prioritizing the program, but how do we get them to understand the value proposition of why this is important right now and how important this could be? Doug, can may I ask, can you hit refresh, please, on the slides?
Yeah, for sure. Give me a moment here.
Thank you.
Like, you just want me to hit the refresh button on the browser here?
Please, yeah.
Right. Let's go back to the presentation all over again.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
No worries, no worries.
There was one more question I was posing to myself that that didn't show up there.
All right.
What is a Zoom call without a few technical difficulties, right? And this is what we're doing. We're making it work, and we're smiling through it and figuring it out because that's all we know how to do.
You were on this slide, yes?
It was, yep, boom, there we go.
All right, let's try this again. Does that work, Philip?
Let me, good to go. Thank you so much. All right, so we were talking about strong value prop and making sure that we're aligned with these folks. So can we still facilitate that strong partnership, and how do we get folks to prioritize where we're at as far as helping bring them along? Ooh, you know what? It might not have updated, but you know what? I'll pull through for my slides over here. So there should have been 3 here, and that's probably on me. So some lessons that we learned here in 2019 and 2018. There were 3, I think, that kind of rose to the top of mind for me that were really important for us to think about before the pivot and moving into 2020 now. We realized that guided projects and tight problem statements up front helped our community fellows obtain results faster. The original timeline was 6 months. Talk about new timeline in a moment, but we realized that the first 3 months were spent with a lot of discovery, research, and once you get into month 4 and 5, that's really when you're really in the thick of it. And then that last month is sort of offboarding and what handoff to our partners looks like. And there really wasn't enough time to really make things happen. So we wanted to sort of scope the work with our partners initially, sort of engage them, and then do a little spin on what recruitment looked like. We needed a bigger pipeline. So we needed to rethink how we're recruiting and training our fellows. And is that me? Ooh, I think we're going the wrong way. 1 second. Okay, and then the last one is centering the people closest to the problem. And so I think that was really important for us to understand. And specifically now in sort of time we're in, where we recognize that people that are closest to the problem are the ones that we need to raise up, and their voices are the ones that we need to hear. So an important question that we asked ourselves as we crafted the new program and decided on our changes was, what if every fellow had lived experience with the problem that they were trying to solve? And so the mission of the program has been and has changed a little bit to primary purpose of the program being to resource and train community members with lived experience and partner them with their local government to more effectively address inequities in service delivery. 2 working definitions that are really important for us to understand with the new program is that lived experience here is referring to project-related lived experience. This is, we also call this direct lived experience, and the intention here is these folks are people who have depended on, been impacted by, or interacted with the system of inequity that our fellows will be helping to develop an intervention for in conjunction with their local government. And the second one here being marginalized people, also referred to as historically or traditionally marginalized, socially excluded, underrepresented, and underserved. These people belong to groups that have historically, intergenerationally, and systematically been excluded from opportunity and prosperity in this country due to institutional racism and white supremacy. This goes back to my initial point of talking about this country currently facing twin pandemics. It's really important to call that out because the work that we do, I think, and a lot of the work that we do generally in the fellowship and this space that we're in public interest tech and civic tech, really is examining and really understanding why there are this just wild imbalances and that these things are intentional. All right. So something we realized, I think, as we are working through a few more definitions and understanding the program here is learning was that when paired with the right community or staff support, both technical and non-technical fellows can succeed. This ties back into sort of expanding our pipeline we didn't want to just restrict ourselves to folks who sort of had some of the titles that we're a little bit more familiar with in this space. Ibraheem, I think touched on this earlier as well, and I shared with some colleagues yesterday. I came into this role not exactly technical, but there's experience that I bring, and I recognize how that can inform the work, and in partnership with someone who does have that background, I think there's a beautiful synergy there. So some changes, more timely than we thought going into March. We're changing the program structure. So I spoke earlier about that 6-month period. We're changing that to 9 months, a dedicated 9 months. And during this time, we want to understand, meet people's needs, and we want to use real-time user data, iterate on solutions, and this is going from intention through implementation. We are going to be changing the team composition. We will have 4 teams with fellows sourced and hired locally, where talent is invested and reinvested back into the local community. And these folks are obviously people that have local contacts and understand the landscape very differently than someone who's a transplant or a fellow who might be working remote from one place and is working closely with folks in a different location. I mean, we want 3 full-time fellows per team, and you know, we also recognize that part-time, we can't really invest as much energy into that, specifically with that 6 months previously, and change a little. I'll share a little more about what it means to be a community fellow. And so some of the things we thought about here were, could we resource and empower people closest to the problem? Can we be user-centered while centering users? Are we training these people with our core principles and values, with things that they're deeply passionate about? Can we help them build their professional networks and inspire movement in the process? And the most important thing here is resourcing and training those that are closest to the problem with the skills that they need to make change in government. Let's see. All right. Oof. Not how I wanted this to come in, y'all, but again, smiling through it. So let's talk about timeline. The initial program launch should have been at the end of March. And so that had to change. With our engagement with program, with our partners, you know, we touched on that, Cass, I think a moment ago. You were talking about how priorities have shifted. We are dealing with partners who are excited about the program and understand the value that the fellowship can bring to their communities and their offices. But you know, priorities are in a different place right now, so we had to push that back. We've actually just announced our 4 locations. So we are moving forward with 2020, which is very exciting. And we'll be shifting and changing what our recruitment looks like now. So where we initially had fellows come to us, having established partnerships with local government, or us being a part of some of those conversations with their problem statement, we're changing all that. We will go forward, and we've done a ton of that research and understanding what local contexts are and what the problems most important to some of these local governments are. We've put together our problem statements, and we have just now launched the search for our fellows in these 4 specific locations. So things that are going to be changing going forward and opportunities for us is we will now have to do orientation virtually. A lot of the work that I'd done with the team last year was virtual because my team is on the West Coast and I'm on the East Coast. And one of the program goals is for the fellows to work locally within their office, shoulder to shoulder with their government partners. And that's going to be really difficult now. A lot of that sort of socializing and that sort of getting to know you water cooler talk is very difficult virtually. But you know what we have realized is, I think if there's that mission aligned and if we do share that same goal, I think that we still have the ability to sort of foster those real relationships. And I'm hoping that eventually we'll get to a point where we'll be able to have all these people in one room. And so this shifts things for us a little bit, obviously. Our launch will be in September, and we'll actually be going out to June of next year. All right. Wonderful. And this was the last time I was able to see a lot of the people that I work with. Yeah. And this was our Brigade Congress last year. This was a wonderful opportunity. These are the brilliant 2019 fellows. And these are the folks I was able to dive in with initially and sort of get up to speed and running with. So thankful and for you know, the work that they've done. And I'm excited to onboard and really be a part of 2020 again. Thank you guys so much for your time.
Awesome, thanks, Phil. I appreciate that. So I guess I'll do my own presentation here, and hopefully I don't have any other issues with Zoom myself here. So we'll see here how this works in particular. So you'll bear with me here. I'll just pop out the screen a little bit so that I can have my notes here at the same time as I am hosting the slide deck is here while also having Zoom at the same time. So if the poor RAM of this little laptop gives out, you'll bear with me here and appreciate your patience with everything as we make our Code for All Summit work. So give a little bit of context here for Code for Canada. Like all the other Code Fours that you guys have heard here from before, the crux really of Code for Canada here is to connect government innovators with the tech and design community. And we have a number of programs along the way that enable that digital capacity building and to build that digital public service that we're looking for here in Canada. And one of those very much flagship programs that we have is the Code for Canada Fellowship. The Code for Canada Fellowship itself, the way that we've structured it, it's for a duration of 10 months. And fellows spend those 10 months doing user research, engaging in sprints, iterating on that, receiving feedback from their particular projects, and building that product at the end of the day. And the idea really is for fellows to help to build that digital capacity in government and demonstrate what's possible with the latest methods in software development, in design thinking, in user experience research, and product management. And the idea is obviously have those applied in serving the Canadian public. And when we talk about that, really we want to ensure that the user experience design for programs are done in a quick way, that they're done in a way that's very simple for Canadians to be able to access, and that they're doing in a way that people are able to very easily access. So one of those examples is actually of great service delivery that many people may know about is CERB. So it's the Canada Emergency Regulation Benefit, or sorry, Relief Benefit. And the idea behind that during the pandemic was to ensure that Canadians were able to access funds as quickly as possible in order to actually pay rent and eat food and do all the things that you're supposed to do when you would normally be able to work pre-pandemic. So what we want to do here at Code for Canada is ensure that those government products and that the service delivery of those products is done in a way that allows Canadians to access it in a quick and seamless fashion. So for the fellowship program here, we have a very humble team. Our team is myself on the government relations side here for our team in particular, and myself, Doug Vidal Hernandez, does a lot of the stuff here, ensuring the check-ins with government partners and kind of gets their perspective on how we can better serve them throughout the fellowship program itself. My coworker Flavia here, as our coaching and support staff member, does a lot of check-ins with the fellows themselves. And so with those two avenues, both supporting the fellows and supporting the government partners, we try to have a very comprehensive view of the entire picture of the fellowship. And then Meha, our program lead, ensures that the right questions are asked and that there's guidance along the way of that experience. That said, there's a massive amount of support on the fellowship program that we get from all across the organization. It's a very big undertaking. The partnership team ensures that those initial conversations with government partners and those stakeholders are done in a way so that we can actually have a partner for fellows to host with during the fellowship. Our outreach and comms ensures that there's always that great story that's been told about the fellowship throughout the length of those 10 months. And our monitoring and evaluation team ensures that our actions are compared against that theory of change. Because we always talk about how we're enabling that digital service delivery, but we want to actually know what impact the fellows themselves are having along that journey. Because it isn't just enough for us to say, we want to actually be able to see how that journey is done and how it's being done in a way that we can actually measure and provide back towards both the public and towards those government partners themselves. So let's look here at the fellowship process and the timeline, the way that it's normally structured pre-pandemic, and then I'll also talk about the way that we've kind of had to change, do some additional work on what working in the open means, given the fact that we can't be co-located with our government partners right now. So for us in particular here at Code for Canada, our fellowship consists of 3 individuals. We have a full stack developer, a user experience designer, and a product manager. Those 3 individuals are put into a government partner for the duration of 10 months. And those government partners really run the spectrum of everything from the local municipal government in Toronto to the provincial government in Ontario and the federal government, of which most offices are located in Ottawa, here where I am myself, but we have had partners as well in Calgary with the Canada Energy Regulator in Alberta. It's on the west side here of Canada. So for the duration of those 10 months in particular, we look at user research, we prototype that particular product, test and repeat. So that's usually the way that it always works in particular. And then we have that digital product or service delivered at the end of the day. And really that digital product or service is the means by which we can build that digital capacity. One thing that we always talk about here at Code for Canada is that we're building a digital capacity within the public service, but also building civic capacity within the tech community. And so it's a 2-pronged approach in that effort. We kind of want to demonstrate as well to the tech community what the public service is able to accomplish. And also obviously demonstrate to the public service what new methods that the tech community is able to instill within government as well, and kind of have that dual sharing of knowledge in between both industries, which sometimes unfortunately are very arm's length simply because of how different they are and how different the processes that they engage with are. So when we look at the fellowship, it's for that 10 months duration, as I've said. So I'll use this fellowship that we have here as an example. We actually started at the beginning of January for this fourth cohort of a fellowship that we've had. So the first month of onboarding, we had it in Toronto. Our fellows had a full month to kind of gain their bearings of what their experience would be like, and also have that initial meetings with their core team with those government partners. February was the second month, and they kind of had another chance to further meet not only the core team that they're working with, but as well also the other individuals, the extended government partners, the executive teams. And then the third month was March, where kind of everything went a little bit off the rails, as I'm sure everybody knows. So that very important user research and prototyping then aspect gets way delayed and pushed back as all government departments are trying to reorganize and reassess how they can put the resources to those obviously very immediate needs to ensure that Canadians have the government programs and the work that they need to obviously have, or ensure that if they can't work, that there's safety measures in place and resources in place for them so that they can actually survive and pay rent and eat food and pay for their bills like everyone else has unfortunately been able to experience. So currently right now, if we look at the way that the fellowship for this cohort in particular is at, we're at month 7 right now. So it's July. That month process from month 4 to month 8 has obviously been shifted and changed around aggressively because of COVID-19. And so that build, test, revise, and repeat phase, which is very important and almost like the very big aspect of the fellowship, has obviously changed drastically, unfortunately, because of COVID-19. And one of the things that we reflected on here at the fellowship team as, I know a number of you, both Code for America, Philson, and Code for Australia, have mentioned on the importance of how co-locating in your government partners is very important. And obviously that's not something that comes very naturally, those kind of like water cooler conversations that you aren't able to have when it's in a remote only environment. And one thing that we really pride ourselves on is building that digital capacity. It's something that I'm going to mention a couple times because it's definitely a big aspect of what we're here for at Code for Canada, and especially the fellowship team in particular. So what does it mean now then to work in the open when you're literally working out of, for some people, their own room or their kitchen tables, or if you're lucky enough, your own home office? what does that mean to work in the open then, when you're no longer co-located with your government team, when you no longer can have those organic conversations with team members, and kind of facilitate those very easy things that now become a scheduled meeting during COVID-19, where now we can't have like an organic chat and simply walk over to that person's desk. What does it mean now to kind of work in the open in a situation where we're all physically quarantined and away from each other? So this actually became like, this strategy of working in the open was actually a key result for us for our second quarter. And it's something that we wanted to set up kind of a strategy around, both internally here at Code for Canada and also for the fellows as well. So we had input from our own directors on what expectations would be for staff internally, and how we could model those behaviors as staff for the fellows themselves. So now there's this renewed commitment on using team blogs, because this becomes very important to be able to demonstrate not only to your government partners, but to the rest of the world as well, what it is that you're doing. I'll highlight that it was actually a blog post from Code for Pakistan that actually inspired this whole process in the first place, because they actually released a blog on what their onboarding process was like in a remote entirely setting, which was something that we were reflecting on here at Code for Canada, as we're going to have to prepare to do the exact same thing when our next cohort starts in November. And there's a lot of kind of unanswered questions on our end on how we can actually do that. So being able to read up on how other organizations are doing that is incredibly important. And for the fellows themselves, for their own internal teams to be able to read on how they're doing, and for other teams to be able to read on how they're doing, is a great way of being able to share a lot of those experiences, which you wouldn't be able to do if you're in a remote only setting. So week notes, when you're a week note is when you are make a little resume at the end of the week of how everything has gone, and just kind of have like a little retro at the end of the week, so that you can actually demonstrate to other people externally how the progress of your work is being done. That becomes very important. Sprint recaps, that also becomes very important. A rosebud thorn retro, those all become very important. And posting that online really demonstrates how you can share that work, those processes, those wins, and those learnings as well, right? Because it is a process of ensuring that you have, that you're sharing that knowledge, and that you're demonstrating what it means to both fail, but to learn at the same time. I think that's a very important aspect of that. So to that aspect, make sure that you're kind of over documenting your work, and those ensuring that that's being done in a way that you can hand over the project itself to the next individual. So the cohort is only for 10 months. The fellowship is only for 10 months. So you have to ensure that when you're starting that handover, that's done early, and that you're looking for those opportunities to create guidebooks and onboarding kits, etc. Because that becomes very important in ensuring the sustainability of the program after the fellows have actually left. One point that I did miss here a little bit, I'm just going to go back to the point there, was on inviting government partners to attend your stand-ups and retros. That isn't something that government partners always do. I'll admit that some of our government partners are very good at hosting regular sprints and having regular stand-ups and retros, but some are doing it for the first time right now because of the fellows. And so ensuring that those government partners are there along the journey is very important to ensuring that they're able to know what the fellows are doing. Because it's very easy then to just like lock yourself up in your own room, and then at the end of this 10 months being like, here you go, this is what we worked on. But we want to ensure that along the journey, along those 10 months, there's regular check-ins to ensure that government partners know what's happening, and also so that they're able to influence what's happening. One thing that is actually really cool that a couple of fellows have done is hosting like regular like workshops that they've done. So one thing that we talked about is we kind of framed it as office hours and demos for partners within our project charter, which is sort of like the guiding document that the fellowship, each fellowship team is structured around. That guiding document provides what's called a project panel, where fellows can continuously receive updates from government partners, as well as for government partners to provide feedback to the fellows. So having those like those check-ins is very important. And so you know, here we're using Zoom right now. In the Canadian Public Service, especially on the federal team, they use Cisco's WebEx, which, you know, has its own ups and downs for sure. A lot of teams are using Microsoft Teams as well as their service. There's a number of different things. We use here Slack on both for Code for All and for Code for Canada. Each team kind of structures their own way. We don't really make any restrictions on what tools are used as long as they're able to be accessed by government partners. That's really the only thing that we ask. And so having that structure is very helpful to ensuring that you have different touch points along the journey. One of our fellows, he's hosted a Agile 101 workshop to kind of show what his government partners, what that even means. We've had different like design symposiums as well that have been hosted by fellows, showing again, what does it mean to have user research in an environment where some government partners either don't quite grasp what that is yet, or perhaps have a different understanding of what that is. And then the last aspect here of what we consider kind of working in the open is taking part in virtual open houses. So we've actually had a couple of virtual open houses already to showcase what the work that the current fellows have been doing consists of, but it's also a way for us to show the possibilities for the next cohort. So usually our open houses act both as a dual purpose of a tool that we can use to recruit new fellows, as we have just, we'll be closing our cohort recruitment this Friday. But it's also a way for fellows to actually showcase what they're working on right now. And it's a really great way for the public at large to also see what's happening right now. And it's a really cool way that Code for Canada can demonstrate to the greater public, to our government partners, what it is that we're doing on. And we really appreciate those opportunities to share that information. So project panels, those are one of the things that I kind of mentioned here, because these project panels now become very important vehicles for our key result of working in the open. Project panels are when the core team, so our government core team partners and the fellows themselves present the current progress of their product or service to the larger department or division or team. And the idea there is to have input from as many individuals as possible, and that can include government stakeholders outside of that team, different managers and directors, the legal side, the finance side, policy, IT. The idea really is to have as many individuals there as possible so that they're able to provide their input and the project panel removes blockers. That's the whole point of the idea, is to be able to remove those blockers and empower the core team. But what happens sometimes is that if we're doing this in a remote only setting, it becomes very difficult to have those organic conversations that now you would have before. And so these project panels then become very important on how it is that we progress the fellowship itself and ensure that that product or that service is done in a way that has as much input from as many individuals as possible. So for a number of these project panels, obviously they've taken place online because that's the only way that they've been able to do it. But previously they've always been done in person, and that's been a big aspect of doing that, is because it provides as much input as possible and ensures that people aren't able to tune out in the same way that an online conversation sometimes is. But we've kind of had to pivot. That's kind of the only way that we've been able to do it here right now. But I just wanted to emphasize here on why the project panel is so important. And we've been fortunate as well that the fellows themselves have been able to receive some great feedback and some great input from their government partners on how to actually do their product better. Because that knowledge exchange is a very big aspect of how we conduct the fellowship. And knowledge exchange in an online setting is a very important aspect when we no longer have those organic conversations and when fellows are no longer co-located with their respective government partners. So one thing I wanted to highlight here was actually a blog post that was done, again, in that same spirit of working in the open. This is actually a blog post that was done by one of our fellows, and it's specifically around how to do user research in a remote only setting. One thing that is very big to the fellowship itself is really understanding your users. How is it that the product or the government service that is being issued is servicing those users? How is it that CERB, the Canada Energy Relief Benefit, is serving Canadians? How is it that for this cohort in particular, she's working with the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs? How is it that the products that that team, OMAFRA, that's the acronym, how is it that those products are servicing farmers or people who work in the agricultural industry? And for that team in particular, the government partners didn't really know. So that's why that user research was obviously a very pivotal and important part of the fellowship plan. But how do we do that now when it's an entirely remote only setting? So I really actually appreciated this post, and I kind of want to highlight a couple of the steps that she had listed out here. So one of those things is find your silver lining. You know, things are obviously going to be different now. We had obviously a couple of technical difficulties right now, and I appreciated Phil San mentioning how kind of have to smile through it right now and be as positive as we possibly can given the circumstances. The silver lining here is that now you can schedule multiple different user research interviews like back to back, whereas previously those were in-person sessions. Now you can do them quite successively, a huge number of them back to back, which was a big aspect to how they can now conduct their user research, given that they had to push that back a little bit because of the pandemic itself. Second point is to kind of acknowledge those challenges. Things are going to be a little bit difficult now, obviously. You are going to recognize that some people prefer to have conversations in person and some prefer to do it online. So kind of try and have a bit of mix of both, and recognize that you're going to have a bit of technical glitches along the way, and that's okay. So that's where the third point comes in, adjusting your research plan, because now that the research plan is kind of thrown out the window, you have to make sure that you're flexible and that you have a backup plan if things don't work out the way that you want it to. Fourth point is to test some more, because as you saw here from our remote control feature, we tested it at the beginning of this conversation, but it still didn't really work when we were actually presenting. So ensuring that you test multiple times is very important, not only in user research, but in any aspect that you're doing across the fellowship. And then the last point that she made, which I really appreciate, is just to be open to more changes. We talk a lot about how we want things to go back to normal, like whatever that meant beforehand. But things aren't really going to be quote unquote normal when we go back to this post-pandemic world. So you're gonna have to be open to changes, whether that's in the short term or in the long term, especially during user research. But as a whole, I would say being open to those changes is a big aspect of what it means to both work in tech and what it means to be able to serve your users in a way that their needs are actually met. Because if there's one thing that we learned from this pandemic is that things are changing all the time. And there's updates that are happening that almost contradict updates that were happening before at the beginning. So you have to understand that you have to keep an open mind and you have to be open to those changes, because there's many uncertainties right now in the way that we're currently in this pandemic. And the only way that we can get through this is that if you're open to those changes and that you understand that there's some flexibility that's inherent towards the way that we'll move forward and progress through this. And then one thing I want to talk about here as well is I think there's a very human element to the fellowship that is unfortunately missed when it's entirely remote. So this is actually a screenshot here from our quote unquote retreat, where we were supposed to have it in it was called Gatineau Park, which is just north here of Ottawa, in Quebec, the adjacent province to Ontario. And we were supposed to have a nice hike and kind of have a moment for reflection, as well as a avenue for conversation where we could talk about both the progress of the fellowship thus far, our rosebud thorns, and kind of talk about the next steps. Doing that online obviously sucks, because that's very short of the expectation that we wanted it to be. But I think one thing that I really want to highlight with this slide in particular is why it's important to provide those avenues for socialization and for those human elements of work. Cass was actually mentioning how sometimes it's kind of awkward, and it totally is. It's not the same, and by no means will it ever be the same to having an in-person reaction. but it kind of works for now. And this is kind of the best that we've done. For me personally, I've actually never worked in a completely remote environment before. I've had different flexible environments, but to be completely remote from the team, it's certainly been a bit of a challenge. So I'm currently located here in Ottawa, but our headquarters for Code for Canada and the vast majority of our team are in Toronto. So there's certainly been a challenge there in having that entirely remote setting. So having those opportunities to engage with your coworkers is hugely beneficial, and very beneficial for the fellows themselves as well, I would say, so that they can also engage with each other in a way that unfortunately they're not able to right now simply because of the pandemic. One of the things that I want to show as well is that our fellows are also really good at organizing things themselves without the staff itself to actually do it for them. One of our fellows, Ramis, who you'll see there on the screen there, one of those Brady Bunch boxes that we have situated here for her Zoom call, he actually organized like his own little tiramisu cooking session. And so he brought like all the ingredients and encouraged everyone to bring their ingredients so that you can actually cook along and do tiramisu alongside with him. And that was a cool experience to get to learn both, like I've never made tiramisu myself, but also get to a way to engage with fellows in a way outside of work that isn't just specifically around the fellowship. One of our other fellows, Jude, he did a Jackbox party evening. So if you don't know what Jackbox is, it's sort of like an online platform for different mini games that you can do in a party setting. And so you can do it entirely online. And he hosted it along with a number of other fellows. And it was an interesting way to get to engage with other fellows in a way that you wouldn't be able to do if you were just entirely remote. But it was a cool opportunity that they had. And so I think like this is kind of an important element as well to ensure that there's different avenues that you can still socialize and do your best to make it as similar as it was before, but also recognize that it never will be the same and that those in-person aspects are very important to the way that we structure things. So one thing I did want to highlight as well is our open call project. So this isn't specifically a fellowship program, but it kind of highlighted this possibility. It's something that we talked about. This is another key result from our second quarter on how a micro fellowship model can function. For us in particular, we've only ever done, our fellowship model has always ever been like 10 months, 3 fellows, PM, dev, UX designer. And that's always been the model that we've used. And it's actually very fascinating to see the different models that all of you folks have used because we haven't really done that ourselves. So we've obviously wanted to show what different ways can we actually explore the fellowship model when we are doing it in a way that isn't constrained to those 10 months. And so this was a project that was actually done alongside the Canadian Digital Service and the Canada School of Public Service Digital Academy alongside with us here at Code for Canada. So very tightly scoped projects were explored with this open call session. And the idea was to have, to kind of service governments that sometimes don't always get the chance to work with the fellowship. So the fellowship obviously requires a lot of resources. It is expensive for government partners, and unfortunately not all of them can afford it. So what about those smaller municipalities that don't always get the resources that they need? Not every city has the budget of Toronto, but they have the same needs and the same users as well that need those digital government services. So this open call project was actually really cool because it enabled those smaller municipalities to have a very tightly scoped project and work with a couple of fellows. And one thing that was really cool about this is that some of the individuals who were working on these projects were actually previous fellows from previous cohorts. So it really demonstrates how having a strong alumni network is very important so that you can then later access and have those touch points with those fellows to ensure that they're able to engage and continue to engage both in digital government and in civic tech in ways outside of their 10-month fellowship. So one of the cool projects that worked here was with, it's called the New Brunswick Women's Council. And it was a very interesting project along how they can better serve their users. They had a lot of great feedback and they were very pleased. And it was really cool to see how a smaller organization can benefit from a fellowship. And it doesn't have to be 10 months necessarily. It can be much smaller. Mind you, this is a very tightly scoped project, but there's different possibilities. And that's really what Open Call was able to bring forward. It was, how can we explore with those different possibilities? And and also ensure that those tightly scoped projects kind of stick as much as possible to that initial vision. Because we did also have the opposite effect where projects that were supposed to be smaller, unfortunately took up a little bit more time because we had some questions along the way and new things came up. And so that's where that being open and being flexible really comes in handy, because we had to kind of pivot in certain situations. And that wasn't something that we saw at the beginning, but it was something that we learned along the way. So this wasn't a project that I was working on in particular, but our program lead, Meha, she took a lot of the responsibilities for the fellowship team along this project in particular. And so it was really cool to see how having a good partnership with both our government partners, with the Canadian Digital Service and the Canada School of Public Service Digital Academy, was able to yield this cool product and service that smaller municipalities were able to use. So our next cohort, like I said, our recruitment concludes this Friday for our next cohort, our 5th cohort of partners. If you know any Canadians or individuals with Canadian working permits, please let them know that our fellowship is open and accepting applications until the end of the week. We would love to have them be here part of this. So I want to talk a little bit about what this cohort looked like. We were coordinating across different time zones. So we're very fortunate actually that one of our government partners this time is Employment and Service Development Canada. Of which, if some of you may know Pia Andrews, who was previously working in Australia and in New Zealand, she's actually going to be working for the Canadian Public Service with this government department, ESDC, Employment and Social Development Canada. She was here in Canada, the pandemic hit, and she had to go back home to Australia. So now we're coordinating meetings across different time zones. This meeting itself that's happening right now is coordinating across different time zones. It was 10 p.m. in Australia when this session first started, and like 5 in Pakistan, and it's 9:30 a.m. right now here in this half of Canada and in New York as well. So pre-fellowship, those meetings that are very important to ensure the success of the fellowship are now happening across different time zones, and everything's online. And those very important kickoff meetings where we have as many individuals as possible present so that we can talk about both like ensuring that the fellows have security access, ensuring that the business and the IT side of those government departments are in sync. All of this is now happening online in a way that previously we really appreciated having those in-person conversations. So that obviously poses this whole entirely new challenge. Recruitment, all the open houses that I was mentioning, we always love to have them specifically in the cities that we would be having government partners. So we would have one, if this wasn't a pandemic, we would have had one in Ottawa, where we have 3 government teams for this cohort, and in Calgary, where we would have had another team. Now all these sessions are entirely remote. So while we had a both Ottawa and Calgary virtual open house, really anyone was open to attend. And that was a very big change for us because it allowed a whole bunch of new individuals who wouldn't have been physically there to join those open houses. And it was a cool way as well for them to get to engage with previous fellows. Because one thing that I mentioned during our working in the open slide is that having those open houses is very important to demonstrate how the fellows are progressing along their project. Next aspect, our assessment. So we haven't actually gotten to this stage yet. We're currently right now in this next cohort only at the pre-fellowship and recruitment stages. Once we close recruitment at the end of this week, we'll start our assessment period where we'll be going through resumes and seeing which will be the next individuals, which will be our actual fellows for the 5th cohort. One thing that we've done in the previous has been what's called a select-a-thon, where we have like different product managers, UX designers, and developers who are senior in their fields assist us in choosing the next cohort of fellows. And we would have them physically at our office in Toronto, order pizza, look at resumes, kind of determine along our rubric who we would want to be our fellows, assess the skills challenge that they've assessed. All this is going to be online now. We're going to be using the breakout room feature in Zoom to hopefully make this work, but I can guarantee it's not going to be the same aspect of it, right? Like this is the session before previously was like from like 6 to 9. Like it was a whole evening thing, and like people would socialize and hang out. We've made it shorter now because having a longer session, it kind of is a bit of a struggle sometimes. There's obviously a screen fatigue, which I'm sure all of you have experienced right now in terms of like my social interactions are online, my work interactions are online. I'll watch Netflix afterwards. And like, honestly, sometimes I just need to like close the laptop and call it a day. So doing that virtual selective long process online is going to be an interesting challenge. We're doing it like in the next week or so. So we'll see how that goes in particular. Onboarding. Like I said, this whole session here that we're having here right now was actually inspired from a blog post from Code for Pakistan on how they onboarded in a remote only setting. We've never done that before, and we kind of going to have some questions on around what that looks like. We've actually onboarded 3 like new staff members for the Code for Canada staff entirely remote. So we're going to take some lessons from that. Because this is actually a key result for our 3rd quarter on how we can actually do a proper onboarding, develop a success spectrum along that, and ensure that the fellows are able to have as similar as an experience as they would if it was in person, but also recognize that there are limitations unfortunately to doing something online. And then the fellowship itself. We'll see how this goes. This is going to be a whole new experience for us too here. We had a midpoint government survey. So at the like 5 to 6 month mark, because our fellowship is 10 months, we do a midpoint survey. And by and large, some of the biggest contributing factor towards building that digital capacity was COVID-19. COVID-19 forced everybody to go digital, whether they liked it or not. And while I would love to say that the fellowships had a big aspect into that, they certainly did. There's no doubt that they did. COVID-19 was a massive factor to ensuring that everyone now had the proper tools to work online, and that the approvals for that and that the bureaucracy that is entailed and always a massive blocker to that was expedited as much as possible. And so in a way, COVID-19 has demonstrated why it's so important to continue doing the work that we're all doing right now with our respective government partners, because some teams are better situated than others. I'll say that much in terms of like how well they were able to pivot to a online only environment. One of the government departments that we're working with, Transport Canada, has actually like announced that they'll be going full remote until the end of the year. And that's a massive undertaking for a government department to be able to do that. So it really highlights why it's so important to ensure that that digital capacity is being built in government in particular, and also ensure that those smaller teams are also brought along that journey, those smaller municipalities, those smaller federal government departments. Not everybody has all the resources of the federal government. So ensuring that everyone is brought along that journey is very important in particular. And like I said, the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, it's something that I'll mention a couple of times because it really highlights the importance of why it's so important to have that proper service delivery. I count myself very lucky that I didn't have to apply to it, but I know many individuals who have had to, close friends and families have had to apply to it, and that made the difference between paying your bills. So having that service delivered in a very quick and easy way has been absolutely crucial, and like I said, really highlights why it's important to have good user-centered government programs. So I'll kind of leave it at that. I appreciate these lovely 3 presenters who spoke before me on their respective fellowship models as well. Sophia, I'm not sure if you have any questions here in particular, or if there's anyone who would want to, feel free to raise your hand.
Yeah, I think this is the moment where you can open your mic and make any questions, or you can put them in the chat if you feel more comfortable and I can read them through. So people in the audience, if you have any questions for each one of the panelists, you can also let us know which one. Okay, so here's one. I'm going to read it. Given that everyone has settled in well in the current situation and have started working remotely, how about having a code for all global fellowship where we all can collaborate on solving global issues? Well, that's a very interesting question. I think it goes more to the core team than to the panelists also. So I'm going to start responding that. Definitely it's something that we haven't considered before this situation, since not all of the Code for All members have fellowships, but it's something that we definitely can and will have conversations about, like how, like not only sharing experiences and maybe like having this kind of like communities of practice for fellowships among the members, but like how can we also create a program that can help out all the members go through this process of changing like the models that they have to more digital ones, and also to see if there's a way that we can create fellowships that can work out in different countries from people from different regions and so on. Definitely something that it's very interesting, and that we have been having like small conversations about it. And I hope that we can, like, for after the summit and when we have more time also to sit down and reflect on the things that we have learned from this process, that we can also like start maybe a project on it. I don't know if any other like panelists can also. Thanks, Cassitie. Okay, there's another question for Cass. Can you share more about what you mean by a junior fellowship?
Sure. It's a new idea, so we haven't exactly ironed it all out completely. But I guess it's having this concept, because we find that with our current recruitment process, we're open to people from all different experiences, but most of the people that we end up getting applications from are people who are either mid-career or have like started in one role and changed to another. So maybe like a designer moved into more of a developing role or vice versa. So for us, it means that like I said, we're getting a lot of people who have a similar experience in terms of how many years they've been working and the types of roles they've been doing. We'd like to diversify that as much as possible. We don't want people, for example, who might have like 15 years experience in the tech industry to feel like the fellowship isn't for them. You know, there's always something to learn no matter how long you've been in the field. And same for people who are just graduating. A lot of the people that we get a lot of interest from people who have just probably in their first year of development or just finished courses in doing development or UX design. And they have so much passion and so many new ideas that's really valuable, but perhaps haven't had any opportunities working in the government context or being an autonomous team, because in our fellowships, our teams make and set their own direction and liaise directly with government hosts. So we're trying to think of ways that we could give these people opportunities to engage with us. So yeah, we're thinking of the idea of pitching them as different types of fellowships, but we're still kind of, as a team, figuring out the shapes they will take. Don't know if that answers it. The short answer is we don't really know yet. That's the rationale behind what we're trying to do.
Got it.
Yeah, everything is like a pilot and a process of iteration. And like I was telling, I don't know who was talking before, but I was telling one of the speakers of, this is our MVP. So I guess it's like the same with all of the programs that we have. It's like the first thing to do, and then we create from that. So Philsa, you also want to like answer the question? You are muted. Okay, I'm gonna unmute you.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect.
That was a lot. Good morning, Meha. I think that was a great question, Cass. I know that the question was for you, but I'd like to add something here in the idea of what opening up to folks that maybe are a little bit earlier on in their tenure looks like. And so what we had as a sort of stipulation to apply to the program previously was this mid-level, and this ties back into our broadening of the definition of like technologists. Because we actually had a proof point from last year. There was a really, when I say junior team, I mean fresh out of college. We thought that they were brilliant enough to, you know, shoot their shot and go for it and actually apply for the fellowship. And, you know, impressively, I wasn't a part of the recruitment and onboarding process. I started right at the beginning of the kickoff, but this was a fresh team. They were right out of school. I thought it was really brave of them to apply. And, you know, they came up with an incredible program. This is the team from Buffalo, recent graduates, and they were working on cash supports and water benefits. and they did an incredible job. So I think the idea of looking at sort of two forms of the fellowship, or just even sharing that we're not just looking for mid-level, and that there is a lot to gain for folks that are more senior in the role, and for folks that are really just coming into this space, I think says a lot about understanding, I think, the potential of people, and also not wanting to turn some of the right folks away. So that's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
No, that's really interesting, and I'm gonna have to connect after this, I think, and have a bit of a further chat, hopefully. But yeah, and I think it's a good opportunity in terms of the other things that we want to do in terms of having shorter fellowships that have a smaller scope, or working with non-for-profits or local governments who, in terms of the types of technical expertise required, or if it's only focusing using on one specific type of software or language, those could be opportunities to kind of match these two people together, or two groups of people together, and give them some experience to build on. So that's something else that we've thought about. So it's kind of complementary to also wanting to diversify who we work with in terms of partners.
Got it. Thank you.
People in the audience, do you have any other questions? You can either open your mic or put them in the chat and I'll read them through. If there are no further questions, I would thank everyone here, the audience, and also Cassitie, Doug, Ibraheem, Filzan. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for participating and being with us.